guess we'll begin the meeting. Hello, everyone. We'll begin with introductions. My name is David Kozis. I'm the Transportation Coordinator from the Public Works Department. And let me just make sure that we have a quorum. Okay, I think we do. So continuing with introductions, is Captain Doucette here yet? Yes. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, I'm here, David.
Okay. Then Isaac, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yep. Hey everyone, Isaac Prezant here, traffic engineer with Newton DPW.
And Mitch, are you here yet? Yep.
Mitch Fishman, resident member of the Traffic Council.
Okay, do we see Councilor Downs yet?
No, she's not here yet.
Okay, but we do expect her to join us soon. And Danielle, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Danielle Delaney, Committee Clerk. And we are also joined by Councilors Kalis, Leary, and Greenberg.
Right. And then Jeremy, can you please introduce yourself?
Yep, Jeremy Freudberg, alternate resident member.
Okay. And I think we're also going to be joined by one of our traffic engineers, Adrian Ayala. I don't think he's here yet.
Yeah, he'll jump in later.
He'll join in later. Okay, so we're just going to begin with our first item of the evening. I just wanted to, I guess, start off by saying we have 13 items on the agenda tonight. It's a lot. It's more than we usually have. We wanted to fit, a lot of things on the agenda because we're not going to be having a meeting in August. So I just want to be respectful of everyone's time, especially for the items that are later on in the evening. So I'm just going to try and, move along at a good pace as much as we can. Okay. So I'm going to begin with our first item of the evening, which is TC. Let's see. Yep. So our first item is TC 3423. It's Amy Myers-Sallins, 17 Carlton Street, on behalf of the residents of Carlton Street, requesting the addition of resident parking permits to the existing 1-hour zones on Carlton Street. So we begin with, I'll do a quick presentation and with a recommendation, and then we can open it up for public comment to respond to the recommendation, and then hopefully we'll be able to move right into a vote. So here's the location. This is Carlton Street in Newton Corner. It's a one-way street. Everyone can see my cursor, I hope. So starting at Pearl Street and then continuing and ending at Center Street, just at the Watertown line with Galen Street right here. It's a pretty narrow street. It's 20 feet wide. There's parking only on one side. It's a 1-hour limit, except for Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. So that's the current restriction. It's pretty restricted for the residents who live on the street, with no parking on one side and a 1-hour limit on the other side, in a pretty densely settled street. So I already went over the existing parking regulations. So our recommendation is to go ahead and approve the request. The request is to have resident permits in addition to the 1-hour limit. So this is something that we've begun doing lately on different streets around the city that have like a 1-hour limit or a 2-hour limit, allowing residents who live on the street to be able to get permits to park longer than the posted limit. So in this case, we would be voting to remove the existing regulations that are on the books and replace it with basically the same thing in the same areas, except instead of a 1-hour limit, the signs would say a 1-hour limit except by resident permit, right? So if you're a resident, you could park all day. You're not, restricted to that 1-hour limit. So these permits would be available to anyone who is a resident of the street, any parcel that abuts that street. They're sold at the Traffic Bureau in West Newton in the police headquarters building. They're $25 a year for stickers that get, that you can attach onto the windshield of your car. Every household on the street would also be entitled to 2 free visitor placards. Those are cardboard placards that are transferable. If you have a guest or if you have service or something like that, you would have to remember to put that placard in your car to be able to park for longer than the 1 hour limit. So that is the recommendation. It's exactly the request that was made. We do think it would be beneficial to the residents of the street to be able to park longer, still sharing the street to some extent. It is a public street. And that is the presentation for this item. We have a 20-day appeals period. Hopefully we'll be able to vote on this pretty soon. But before we vote, let's open it up for public comment. If anyone from the public would like to respond to the recommendation, offer any input, now is the time. If you could just raise your hand and we will call on you. And as usual, maybe Isaac could help me also see if anyone has their hands raised. And I just was clicking through and I see Councillor Downs has joined us. So Amy Meyer Salins.
Yep.
Hi, thank you so much. I just wanted to say that our whole street is in strong support of this, and we're very thankful to the council for a positive recommendation here. This is something that wouldn't actually add any additional parking spaces, so we're not concerned about, additional congestion or additional safety concerns or anything like that. It's really just, as you said, to make it a little bit easier on the residents. And so we're very happy with this favorable recommendation. And I can say that when I canvassed the block, it was uniform support for this. So thank you to the council for the recommendation. And please let us know if you have questions.
Thank you for that comment. And I see you obviously live at 17 Carlston Street. Michael Perry, if you can unmute and say your address, please.
Hi, everybody. Michael and Michelle Perry. We're at 55 Carlton Street. We just wanted to voice our support for this initiative as residents of the street. We think this would be a good addition for the street and enable residents to park.
And we thank the council members for their positive recommendation in this matter.
Thank you for that comment. So this is, we've just, like I said before, Traffic Council has just recently started to take this approach, really, of adding in to the existing regulations and overlay of the resident permits. I think that this is going to, be popular among a variety of streets in Newton. So it will probably see more and more of them, more work for the Traffic Bureau, right, to distribute permits. And so that is my prediction. So I see Stefano, if you could unmute yourself and just say your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Steph Katsonis. I'm at 37. I have a car. My son has a car. One of my boarders has a car. And of course, we are very much in support of this. There's sort of a double-edged sword to this. One is that we need the flexibility because we're not constantly moving cars, right? Or sometimes you have a couple of guests. But also, the flip side of that is that there are a lot of commuters who park here and just disappear for the day because the 57 is nearby, 2 express buses are nearby. So on the other side of the coin, I assume the city will see fit to therefore be more liberal with its ticketing of non-permit holders and to keep people from using it just as free parking for the day. Oh, and may I add one more thing before it's a little bit of a lower order kind of issue, but Joseph Kamauj owns the garage at the end of the street, and he's a great guy, and many of us are his customers. I am, Fran is, Suzanne and James are, my son is, my ex who doesn't even live here in Brighton is. And he's a good guy and he does right by us all the time. And he needs to park along, a few cars out there with all the repairs he does. So I'm hoping that this doesn't impinge on his ability, on his business, basically, that he can get, he'd probably pay for 1 or 2 permits, at least $25 things happily, to make sure it doesn't interfere with his business. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there would be any change for the business owners. Residents of the street would be able to buy the permits. I think, it's interesting in terms of the ticketing and enforcement, because I've been thinking about, does this make it easier or more difficult for enforcement? And I think that it does both, right? I think that it makes it more difficult for enforcement because now the parking control would need to get out whenever they are looking at a car to see if there's a permit in the car. So that makes it a little more difficult for them, but it also makes it easier because once they see that there's a permit in the car, they would not have to come back again in another hour and see if that car is still parking there. So that's my assumption. Maybe Captain Doucette, do you sort of agree with that? Do you think it's going to be more difficult and also kind of easier for enforcement when we move toward this type of situation?
Yes, that's accurate, David.
Okay. Very good. Okay, Jesse Corey, if you could just say your name and your address, please.
My name is Jesse Corey. I live at 64 Oak Cliff Road, Newtonville. My comment is that on Carlton Street, from where it starts at Pearl Street through the curve, there's no parking on either side, and I want to see parking be allowed on one side of that portion of Carlton Street so that residents could be allowed to park right in front of their houses, and so that people who turn from Pearl Street onto Carlton Street know exactly where the lane is on Carlton Street.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Just to be clear, the recommendation right now is to leave all the no parking zones exactly where they are. All the 1 hour zones would be exactly where they are now. We would just be adding in the except by resident permit onto those signs. If there's some additional change that residents on the street want to make, they can file another traffic council item moving forward. I see. Should we go to the city councilors at this point? Councilor Greenberg.
Oh, thank you. I just want to voice my strong approval for this item and support the neighbors in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Greenberg. Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Kozis. I also wanted to just be here to give my support for this move, which I think is important and pretty essential for for the residents. The 1 hour is very restrictive. And I know, as Steph mentioned, that is a magnet for commuters as well. But just keep in mind, I'm sure that this means there'll be a lot more cars parked on the street all the time. So it'll be a little narrower to maneuver. So I think we should wait on any other changes until we see how this works out. But I am in full support, and thank you for hearing this evening.
Thank you very much. James, if you could unmute yourself and say your name and address.
James Martignoni, 29 Carlton. I just wanted to say I don't think we should dilute the current thing by. I think the position to add additional parking at the beginning of the street is, from safety concerns, problematic and dilutes the current issue. So I personally wouldn't support that, but it's not what we're here to discuss at the moment.
Thank you very much. Ivida, if you could unmute yourself and your address, please.
Hi, Alan McDonald and Iveta Zorbete from 19 Carlton Street. So we want to voice our support in favor of this. Thank you, Amy, for putting it all together. And kind of what Stephen was saying, we do agree that ticketing is probably positive to kind of keep the rules enforced. There's definitely a lot of people, a lot of cars that tend to disappear that don't live on this road. But one additional comment about the auto body or the auto shop at the end of the street, they do tend to park on the sidewalk a bit, kind of blocking the sidewalk that we have to walk in the road, that we have a dog. I'm not sure if the ticketing kind of can take care of that as well. But that has been a concern that we've had. I understand they have a business to run, but it is kind of in the public way a bit.
Right. So thank you for that. It is a city ordinance that requires all 4 tires on a car to be on the street, not on the sidewalk. So and we do know that cars are ticketed regularly across the city for parking on sidewalks. So we would expect that on Carlton Street as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stefano, if you have another
Yeah.
comment.
So in response to Allison's remarks, thank you, Allison, for that. I just wanted to say that you were concerned that maybe there'll be more cars in the street. I think most of the people attending the Zoom here will say the street has virtually no parking spots a lot of the time because of all the other non-residential car owners parking on the street. So it won't actually get busier. If anything, it might get easier.
Okay, thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone that we do have 12 items on the agenda after this item. So it does seem like we are moving, it seems clear how we're, like, the direction that we're moving for this item. But if there's anyone that still would like to make a comment, James, is your hand up again or from before?
Sorry, I forgot to bring it down.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we take this discussion to the members of Traffic Council? Okay, so I want to just thank everyone from the street for putting this proposal together and for all the emails that we saw and for coming tonight. So
Thanks to Amy.
Yes, thank you, Amy. So for all the members of Traffic Council and the city councilors on the call, what comments do we have? We do have language that has been drafted. We see it on this slide on page 9 that we could vote on today to move this this recommendation forward. Does anyone like to make a motion or any further comments?
Yeah, David, this is Isaac. I'm ready to make a motion to move ahead with the recommendation.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Isaac to approve the recommendation. This would be TPR 884 for TC 3423 to approve the request as shown on slide 9. Any last comments before we vote? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 884.
Okay, so for the residents of the street, so we've now voted to approve this request. We now have a 20-day appeals period. So between now and August 2nd, if anyone could appeal this vote, I don't really think anyone's going to, but we can't move forward with changing the signs until after August 2nd. So what you'll see is at some point after August 2nd, you'll see the signs change on your street so that you'll see that signs will now say 1 hour limit except by resident permit. So that's your indication that now would be the time to go down into the traffic bureau in West Newton. You have to go in person, and you could purchase your permits at that point. You might want to call the traffic bureau in advance of going down to make sure that you have all the right documentation. Captain Doucette, can you could just say what would be required to get the permit for the residents who live on the street?
First, they need to check a money order for $25 per sticker and proof of residency. Usually your vehicle registration will suffice.
Okay, so so that's our vote, and we're just gonna, unless there's any other questions, we're gonna move on to the next item. All right, well, thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna go on to our next item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next item is TC 3323. It's Councilors Greenberg and Leary requesting to add a no turn on red restriction at the northbound or Park Street approach to the part of the Park Tremont traffic signal. So here's a view of the location. This is Park and Tremont in Newton Corner. We have the Bigelow Middle School nearby, 1 block away. We have the Underwood School 1 block away. We have a very busy Tremont Street with a lot of cars traveling up this through the intersection up to Newton Corner and to the Pike and Charles Bank Road. Here's a view of Park and Tremont looking north onto Tremont Street. So Newton Corner is up to the left. So our recommendation is just to put a no turn on red in this intersection. There's a lot of school kids that are crossing, to go to Bigelow, to go to Underwood. And so we think that this would be a safety improvement to stop all the cars at the red light. So our recommendation is to approve this item. And that's, if there's anyone who wishes to speak on this before we vote, if you could raise your hand, please. Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Kozis. I obviously fully support the no turn on red here. I just want to also raise awareness about, I'm concerned about some lack of enforcement on no turn on red. I know I've gotten complaints from the no turn on red at Center Street and Center Ave near where Marathon Sports is, that cars routinely go through that. So I just hope that we can have some improved enforcement with these rules. If we're making these rules and requiring these new signage, I want to make sure the city's fully behind it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. I also wanted to mention that we did receive 4 emails from within the past 2 weeks from residents in the area and across Newton that were all supportive of adding this no turn on red sign at this location. Councilor Greenberg.
Thank you. Yes, of course, I'm in full support of this. I wanted to thank Jen Martin and the Safe Routes School Task Force for bringing this to our attention. They do a lot of hard work and I really appreciate their work. From her email, she mentioned that there will no longer be a crossing guard at this intersection for the schools. Is that correct?
I don't know about that.
If anyone would know, it would be Jen Martin.
I'm sorry.
I think that Councilor Downs said that if anyone would know, it would be Jen Martin. It's definitely something that we could get back to you with, Councilor Greenberg.
Okay.
I'm not even sure that they're determined at this point exactly where all the crossing guards would be.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'm glad we're getting these done, at least if there's no crossing guard going to be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Greenberg. Any other comments on this? Okay, so I'll make the motion to approve the language of TPR 885 for TC 3323 to add the no turn on red at Park and Tremont in the northbound direction. And are there any last comments before we vote? Okay, so I actually see that we're joined by Councilor Malachy. Welcome. Okay, so Danielle, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kozis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Councilor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 885.
Thank you. And I think I see Jeannie Fairley, although it says Alyssa Giuliani. So you're our ADA coordinator on the call. Okay, so our next item, let me see, is TC 3223. This is Councilors Greenberg and Leary requesting to add a no turn on red restriction at the southbound Tremont Street approach of the Park Tremont traffic signal. So very similar to the last one. This is the same intersection, but in the opposite direction. This is Park Street looking south. At Tremont Street, you have Bigelow continuing up to the left, and you have Underwood to the right. So it is the same recommendation as before with this crosswalk, the pedestrian volume, the school children, we do think it would be safer to clearly have a no turn on red sign in this location as well, and that's our recommendation. So I see that Jesse, you have your hand raised.
So I have two comments. Number one, the docket item says Tremont Street, but this actually is Park Street. And so this should be approved as amended. And number two, I don't think that I would support this no turn on red sign because I'm not sure how many people would actually turn right on red in this location because it looks kind of like going straight.
Thank you for that comment. Any other comments? Okay. Would anyone from Traffic Council like to make a motion? This
I'll
would be
make
the
a quick-
language that we would need. Who just made the motion? Was it Counselor?
I will make the motion under Counselor Downs.
Downs?
But let's be sure we have the name of the street right.
This is a no turn on red from Park Street onto Tremont Street. Oh,
It's,
Park Street onto,
well, hold on. We just need to note the location, the language. It's not what street you're necessarily turning onto. That
it's a
matters.
no turn on red at Park Street onto Park Street.
Yeah, but it's still, the intersection is still Park at Tremont.
Still Park
the
at
direction.
Tremont.
Yeah.
That
in the
is,
direction.
yeah.
Yeah. So we're fine.
So we're talking about the location, not
Yeah.
the direction of the motion of the vehicle, right? The
Correct.
intersection is Park at Tremont, southbound on Park Street at Tremont. So this is correct, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table to approve the language of TPR 886 as shown on page 17, on slide 17. Any last comments? Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette.
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 886.
Thank you. Our next item is TC 3123. This is, oh, and I guess I should have mentioned for the last item, we did also receive 4 emails in support of the no turn on red sign. So TC 3123. This is Councilors Greenberg and Leary requesting to add a stop sign on Hibbard Road at the intersection of Tremont Street. This is the location. A lot of cars come, travel down Park Street to Tremont Street and go up Hibbard Road to Washington Street. There's a do not enter at Washington Street, but it is a two-way street, so cars are traveling in both directions on Hibbard Road. Here's a view of Hibbard Road looking south at Tremont Street. So we at Traffic Council get these types of requests for stop signs at T intersections pretty much every single meeting. We have one. And so when we get this type of request, there's no official warrants that we need to look to. It is a T intersection. It's an applied stop. You're supposed to be stopped at the end before you take your turn at the end of Hibbard Road. We're not required to put a stop sign there, but we could. Stop signs are allowed. And over the years, Traffic Council has taken a positive approach when this type of request is in front of us. We think that it definitely clarifies the right of way by having a stop sign there. We also think that there's a small safety benefit, making sure that the cars come to a stop, that they know they need to stop. There's a queue that they're supposed to be stopping before they turn at the intersection. It's especially important when there's a crosswalk, when there's pedestrians, bicyclists nearby, or any type of sightline issues, anything blocking a sightline. So our recommendation is to approve this request as well, to put in the stop sign at the end of Hibbard Road. It would look like this. We already actually have the stop bar. The stop bar, we've noticed the stop bar's been there for a very long time. So we would just be adding the stop sign. And so that is our recommendation, to approve the stop sign Hibbard Road southbound at Tremont Street. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this? We do have 2 letters of support that came to us, or 2 emails. Okay. So I'll go ahead and make the motion then to approve this item. This would be TPR 883 for TC 3123. Whoops.
No, it would be TPR 887.
Is that what I said?
You said 883.
Oh, I meant to say 887. Yeah, you're right. Thank you, Danielle. TPR 887 to add the stop sign Hibbard Road southbound at Tremont Street. Any last comments? Okay. Could you please call the roll, Danielle?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 887.
Thank you, Danielle. Okay, so I'm going to open the next 2 items together. We have TC 3023. This is Counselor Downs and Kayla's requesting to change the parking regulations on Columbia Avenue in order to install bicycle accommodations. We also have TC 2923, Counselor Downs and Kayla's requesting to change the parking regulations on the block of Heatherland between Upland Avenue and Winchester Street in order to install bicycle accommodations. And I'm going to just take a quick look to see who's here. Okay. Then I will go ahead and do this presentation. So for TC 3023, this is the portion of Columbia Road that we will be discussing. It's the first 3 blocks between Winchester Street and Needham Street. Here's a view of Columbia Avenue looking toward the east from Needham Street. This first block is 2-way traffic. And then when you get a little bit further, it becomes 1-way toward Needham Street. This is a view looking east from Kenneth Street with the do not enter sign. Here's the concept plan that we have for the bicycle accommodation. The idea is to improve bicycle safety for anybody who's coming from Needham Street with the new bicycle lanes that are going to be added onto Needham Street as part of the reconstruction. We have Avalon Bay nearby. One idea is to allow students to bicycle straight down Columbia Avenue and Heatherland from Avalon Bay and areas on Needham Street over toward the Countryside School, which at some point in the next couple of years we expect is going to go under reconstruction. We want more people walking, more people riding their bikes, less people driving. And so that was the genesis for this idea. As shown on this concept plan, we would have sharrows or just bicycle markings along the first block of Columbia Avenue in both directions on this 2-way segment. And then when you get past Kenneth Street, we would be adding a contraflow bike lane. So remember that Columbia Avenue is 1-way for motor vehicles westbound toward Needham Street. We would be adding on the south side of Columbia Avenue a contraflow bike lane. So the bicyclists would be able to continue down through Columbia Avenue over to Winchester Street. We would be removing parking on Columbia Avenue, along the 2-way portion, and also the southern side of Columbia Avenue where the bicycle lane would be added. No right turn signs except for bicycles from Kenneth Street onto Columbia, from High Street onto Columbia, and a little stop sign for bicycles at the end of Columbia Avenue when you get to Winchester Street. So in order to make that happen, what Traffic Council needs to do is make some changes to our traffic and parking regulations. And this slide and the next slide are the changes that we need to make. We would need to, and this is all just very technical, we would need to change the one-way street. It's still a one-way street for motor vehicles, Columbia Avenue from Winchester Street to Kenneth, but we would make it one-way except for non-motorized vehicles. So the bicyclists would be able to officially travel in the contraflow bike lane. Also, we need to specifically vote to add a stop sign on Columbia Avenue at Winchester Street in the eastbound direction. We would also need to modify the parking regulations on Columbia Avenue so that it would be prohibited on both sides between Needham Street and Kenneth Street, that first block, and then only on the south side between Winchester Street and Kenneth Street. So no changes to the parking restrictions on the north side. There would be no change to still be able to park on the north side between Winchester Street and Kenneth Street. So those are that's the presentation for this item. I'm just going to run through the next one as well. This is the one block of Heatherland. So continuing down from Columbia Avenue, you get to Heatherland, which brings you all the way down very close to Countryside School. Oops, sorry. So it brings you all the way down. I think this is called Andrew Street right here, this loop right there. So we're only talking about this first block of Heatherland, this one block. Here's a view looking toward Upland Avenue. It's looking east. So this block of Heatherland is actually one way in the opposite direction. It's one way eastbound. So the recommendation here on our concept plan is to install a contraflow bike lane in the westbound direction. So, you know, the students and everyone else could bicycle down Heatherland, then, you know, continue through. Right now, you're not supposed to because it's one way. So we would be creating a contraflow bike lane and allowing bicycles in the bike lane to continue through legally on Heatherland Road. We would be adding a little stop sign at the end of Heatherland Road for bicycles at Winchester Street. So these are the technical changes that we would need to be voting on, to the changes to our traffic and parking regulations. Just like what I went through, making it one way except for non-motorized vehicles, adding the stop sign and changing the parking regulations so that you're prohibiting parking on Heatherland Road on the north side of that one block. Continue to allow parking on the south side. So those are the presentations for these two items. I'm now going to stop here and open it up to the public. We have received 4 emails for these two items in support of making these changes, and we have received 1 email opposed. But now if anyone from the public wishes to speak on this item, now's your time to raise your hand, and then we can call on you. So I'll just wait a moment to see if anyone wishes to speak on this item. And I don't see anyone raising their hand. Isaac, do you see anyone? Jeannie, I do see your hand. Can you please unmute yourself? And I see you changed your name to your actual name now.
Yes, I'm not going under an alias. I don't know if Matt's having some issues with raising his hand, so I'm going to defer to Matt Chow first. If he wants to speak, would you mind?
Okay, I see Matt, but you are actually muted.
Cloud recording is in progress. Sharing view up.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Matt.
Okay.
We need to first know your name and your address.
My name is Matthew Chow. I live at 95 Columbia Avenue, Newton Highlands, and I'm the second house in as you come off of Winchester Street onto Columbia Ave. And I'm here because I am opposed to the bike lane as recommended for a number of reasons. First of all, I'm totally blind and use a guide dog. And one of the things that I do is that I often take my dog out into the street off the end of my driveway for relief purposes. And the problem with the proposed lane is that I'm on a hill going downhill towards Winchester Street. I'm concerned, even though the bike lane is on the south side of Columbia, there could be situations where there's traffic, vehicular traffic going both ways, because from an operational perspective, the cars actually go the wrong way on the one-way section of Columbia Ave. And it virtually makes it a two-way street. And if you have, let's say, cars or trucks parked on my side of the street, which is the north side, that's going to compress the cars and the bikes. And God forbid if you have cars going both ways along with bikes, which in turn is going to make the traffic go into my side of the street. Now, I'm totally blind. I have no vision whatsoever. And when I take the dog out, sometimes she ends up, pulling out towards the middle of the street, which, at which point sometimes I get disoriented. And all it takes is one misstep on the power of a car or bicycle, and I'm toast. And I have been hit by bikes, and I have been hit by cars. And I can tell you that as a person who is blind, it's one hell of a scary experience. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a risk management issue for me to have bikes and cars sharing a street that's supposedly supposed to be one way, but in operational terms is not. The other thing about this is it's not a heavily trafficked street, but when it is, but when cars do come through, it gets pretty hairy. And also, we have never seen kids going down Columbia Ave towards Winchester, the countryside. Not only that, do you really, I find it hard to believe that parents are going to escort their kids every day from Avalon or wherever they are, all the way down Columbia Ave to Winchester. And oh, by the way, because it's downhill, human nature being what it is on bicycles, having been a biker myself on a tandem, they're going to take that hill and they're going to zoom and boom right down that thing. Stop sign, be darned. And I have, in terms of having been hit, I have 2 front teeth that were knocked out by a bicycle to show for the fact that this does happen. And if you think that most bikers obey the rules, I beg to differ, because I've had that, being hit by the bike was one thing. I had one close call on Archer Street in Boston where a messenger bike went by so fast that it didn't register with the dog. And if I'd been another foot out towards the street, I probably would have been hit. So, I fail to understand why there needs to be a bike lane on Columbia Ave. A, you're publicizing the fact, oh yeah, this is a bike path, go take it. And B, by doing that, you're going to up the risk for those of us who are pedestrians and who are otherwise disabled or impaired. Some attention really needs to be given to those of us who do not drive, cannot drive, or can't ride a bike.
Thank you very much for that comment. Just to be clear, there's no recommendation to make Columbia Avenue a two-way street. We have a sign that is do not enter. I understand that some people ignore the sign and continue through. That is a moving violation. If they get stopped, they would be fined.
Well, then there should be
we are
more
not
enforcement
recommending
respect.
to remove that sign for vehicles. It would still be one way.
It's not stated as one way, sir. It only says no right turn at Kenneth and at High Streets.
Well, there's a do not enter sign at the end, when the one way begins at the end of Columbia, or right at Columbia, Kenneth Street.
Okay, but we observe a lot of cars going the wrong way down that street.
Right.
And I've been lucky so far, but my luck can only go for so long.
Okay, thank you very much.
And the bike lane is not going to help.
Raise hand.
Captain Doucette, did you want to comment at this point?
Please, thank you. David, could we possibly add a one-way sign at that do not enter sign above it? To
Yes.
make it even more clear to motorists not to head down Columbia in the wrong direction?
Yeah. And Isaac, do you think it might even make sense to add a second do not enter sign on the opposite side, right on this side?
Yeah, we can do that.
I think that if we do know for sure that we have cars that are traveling the wrong way on Columbia, I think adding a second do not enter sign, we wouldn't have to be voting on that at traffic council, but we can make a note of it. Alex Rolfe?
Hi, Alex Rolfe, 34 Plaisted Road, and also Safe Routes to School representative for Bigelow. I just want to say anything the traffic council can do to make it easier for children to bike to school is always appreciated and makes a big difference. Certainly some children, some parents are nervous about it on larger roads, and this seems like a smaller road and therefore a good route. And to the previous comments about stop signs, that's an issue for people in all forms of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just making a note to myself to ask our traffic superintendent to add a second do not enter sign at Columbia and Kenneth and a one-way sign. Jeannie.
Thank you. Yeah, I usually don't get too much involved in bike lanes, but in this case, I feel that that a sign just saying bikes are allowed to go, straight ahead at Kenneth and Columbia towards Winchester. This is I thought the principle of bike lanes was when it's a small or not very busy street, that we're not throwing bike lanes down every single side street you can imagine. And in this case, it's detrimental to one of the residents to begin with. And informally, this is happening anyway. Bikes going both ways. Of course, they could always go, each way. If there's no enforcement of a car going the wrong way, certainly there won't be any enforcement of a child or a parent and a child or an adult biking going the wrong way or going towards Winchester. I really fail to see the need to put down on and move cars over, take parking away. And even if you want to take parking away just to make it open, I don't see the need for pushing the traffic over so that they won't go anywhere near that contraflow. They don't anyway because there's been parking. So I really can't understand why we need to do this on this particular street where there's a resident with a disability that actually is the same as mine. And we live in fear of crossing bike lanes or bike lanes crossing us and bikes, of course. So I'd like to know if in general, does the traffic council approve of bike lanes on small, how wide is this street? On small streets, and I don't even know why it's one way, but I'm sure there's a reason why it's one way from Winchester to Kenneth. But I'd like you to rethink what's the need for this. It certainly still can be advertised that and I think you could put the sign at the beginning of Kenneth and Columbia to say vehicles not allowed, bikes allowed, to legalize it. If you feel the need to legalize what's already happening with children and adults biking and doing a shortcut over to Countryside. So I would like to know why this street was, picked when it's a quiet street. I've been told you don't need bike lanes on not so very wide streets and not so very busy streets. Winchester, I wouldn't let my 4th or 5th grader cross Winchester without a crossing guard. Let me put it that way. But in any case, I hope you will rethink that. Maybe just do it with signage and not bike lanes, not necessarily taking the parking away. I'm not opposed to that, but I am opposed to putting a bike lane down on a street and let it be shallow and let it be just that bikes are allowed to go that way. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll say one or two things, and then I guess I would like some other people to chime in. Well, first of all, traffic council does not vote on line painting, right? We are, it's not under our jurisdiction at all to vote on like what gets painted anywhere in the city. What we're voting on at traffic council is changes to the TPR, which are the one-way, except for bicycles, right? And the stop sign for bicycles. We're not voting on whether or not to actually paint anything in the road. That's, you know, that's something that probably Isaac or someone else, or Adrian, if he's here, would be able to speak to.
Yeah,
I would also say that, so this is really the straight shot, really, between Needham Street, Avalon Bay, you know, Needham Street where the bike lanes are going, and the Countryside School. Straight down Columbia, down Heatherland, there's a pathway right off of Andrews Street, right into Countryside School. So this is the closest, you know, this is really the desire line. And right now, bicycles technically are not allowed to enter Columbia. It's a one-way street. There's a big sign that says do not enter. Bicycles technically are not allowed to enter onto that street. So that's one thing the traffic council is doing, is voting to specifically make it legal for bicycles to be on the street. So I guess those are the things that I wanted to say. I know, Isaac, you were trying to say something. Did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to emphasize two things here. Number one, having spent some time out here while school was in session, doing a walkthrough with several folks who were in support of this. You know, I really was pleasantly surprised with the amount of children already biking through this area. I personally was not aware of the volume of them. So they're doing it now. So really it's a matter of what can we do to make it easier, and what can we do understanding that the volume of bicyclists is likely to increase. Yes, Avalon's already there, but Needham Street is being constructed. You know, generally when we talk about bike lanes, you know, sometimes we say things like, if you build it, they will come. I think it's absolutely realistic to expect additional bicycle volumes on Needham Street. We also have the Northland development, which of course will have a lot of folks living there, presumably some of them being children. So that's my emphasis. Number one, bikes are already here. They're already doing it. Number two, the key distinction here, Jeannie, is that it's contraflow. So, you know, at this point, you know, when we look at contraflow bike lanes or just contraflow bicycling as a whole, you know, we have very good guidance from MassDOT and from NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, as far as, you know, why actually striping a contraflow bike lane is so preferred. You know, we really need something as guidance, especially considering these are children that maybe don't necessarily have the same level of judgment as an adult. And a lot of this is really pointing back at the vehicles. So, you know, a vehicle has been driving here for however many years, going, you know, following the one way. They need to be aware somehow that bicycles have space in the roadway. So it just really becomes about driver expectations and raising awareness. And having striping on the street will be that much more effective than just simply going with signs.
I just like to reply that bikes and pedestrians are supposed to be able to, you know, have some preference if there's sidewalks, if there's not sidewalks. Somebody said this was going to help pedestrians. I don't see how. In fact, it will definitely impact a resident who is a pedestrian all the time, like myself. So I just don't see what is the need if it's already informally a bike lane. I realize, I'm sorry, David, I forgot that you don't, and maybe there's a hearing for when the bike lanes get painted or if they get painted, but you know, the no parking, apparently nobody worries about that on the south side of that section. But what it will do if the bike lane is painted is to move the cars over even closer to where Matt relieves his dog, and even for just being on top of the curb, basically. It wasn't that way for the one-way section. I'd like to know how wide this road is, and I really still think that the principle of a small neighborhood street does not need bike lanes, contraflow or otherwise. And it's not just an opinion. There's an awfully big bike lobby and a very small pedestrian with disabilities, resident with disabilities voice here. And so that is why I wasn't planning on coming to this meeting, but I felt obligated to, because I have a resident who is advocating for this not to happen, especially not to encourage by painting bike lanes in both ways, both directions, unless, again, they're just available to bikers. And you are going to put a sign saying bikes can go that way. So isn't that enough? So thank you very much for listening to me. And I hope you will consider that every street in Newton does not have to have a bike lane. And even if this is a straight shot, do you know how busy Winchester Street is? It's not a straight shot. It is a very, very busy street. And no, it's not as busy as Dedham, Winchester, and Needham. I know this area quite well, and I just can't understand that even a 4th or 5th grader would even do all this all by herself, all the way to school and back, without some parent guidance or without a crossing guard and a crosswalk. But thank you for listening to me, and I hope you will consider that maybe even removing the parking isn't necessary, but improving the signage. Thank you.
Thank you,
David,
Jeannie.
may I speak?
Councilor Downs.
I'm one of the docketers, Jeannie, and I've cased this out very carefully. I've also met with Matt Chow at his house. So a couple of things that you said were incorrect, or you know, you don't, you know, you may know the street, you may know the area, but you haven't seen it recently. There are a few bicyclists who take that anyway. We do not want to encourage illegal behavior you know, by young bicyclists, particularly not this age. We're talking K to 5. I expect them to come with their parents, and I do not expect they will come unattended. I can't imagine a parent letting their kid cross Winchester on their own. However, it's a very short stretch, less than half a mile from Avalon to Countryside. And once they're past Winchester, they're basically home free. So it'd be a very short detour for a parent to take their kids at least that far, or even all the way into Countryside on a bike and then come back. We are officially taking parking away on the south side of the street for the contraflow lane. Mr. Chow lives on the north side of the street. The south side of the street, and I've been there a couple of times, very little parking, if any. So we're not really taking away anything that's in demand. On the north side of the street where Mr. Chow lives, that's the uphill side. So any cyclist that's coming up from Winchester in the right direction, it's going to be going pretty slowly. And I met with Mr. Chow at the site, and he conceded as much. The downhill side and the bike lane being painted there on the south side, and understand that everybody going downhill toward Winchester Street is going to be going against traffic. And so what are they going to want to do? They're going to want to be in that lane. So as far from Mr. Chow's house as they can possibly get. So even if his dog doesn't want to go at the curb and wants to go out to the middle of the street, they're unlikely to encounter a bicycle, because bicycles are going to be going the other way, except in the evening. So, you know, I just don't see, this is not just a straight shot, but it's a really logical way. We need to make safe routes into schools. And I think this is a win. I ran it through not just with the traffic division and talking with Mr. Chow, but I also was there with the counselor who lives most locally, David Kalis, who's on this call. And he said, oh yeah, I take that all the time myself. This would be brilliant, because this is the way that kids from Avalon can get to Countryside We're about to hike the bus fee to $400 a year and include elementary school kids, and they're going to need a way to get to school. They're only a half mile from Countryside. This would make a lot of sense. And the Winchester crossing is on the list for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon, so a pedestrian operated crossing signal. And yes, if I were a parent, I would definitely cross with my kid.
Thank you, Counselor Downs. Counselor Kalis.
Thank you, Mr. Kozis. So I agree with what Counselor Downs has just run through and the technical aspects of it. The one thing that I do want to bring up, and I'm just so you know, I'm on Andrews Street, so Heatherland goes right into my house basically. And as she said, people are using Heatherland, especially coming from Upland, coming from Verndale, coming from Winchester on the east side. All those kids are biking on their own and using Heatherland and to go to the school directly. I'd say on Columbia, you have families that use that when they're coming to use the park because they have to cross there. Oftentimes, what's interesting, this whole conversation has got me thinking about some of my friends who live in the Falls, and when their kids would bike, they would always bike down Needham Street because there's a light there, and they'd use that light because it's safer. And I still think people are going to be doing that. But in the long run, with all of the development we have on Needham Street, we're going to have more kids, and they're going to want to take both the shortest route, which is down Columbia, and they're going to want to take the other route, which might be safer because it has a light, which is right down Needham. Doing this now is preparing us for when we have that influx of kids and having us learn what works and what doesn't. And I think it's really important that we do that. And I think the point, I think that Mr. Chow brings up some really good points, and I hear him, but I'd rather figure this out before we have a problem with more kids now when the volume is light, and be ready for it, because it is going to happen. And I think that this gives us time to kind of get there. So that's what's really important to me. But the kids are, people are using this already. The fact that they don't really recognize, unfortunately, that street signs are applicable to bicyclists as well when they're biking with families, it seems. And that's all I have to say. That's why I'm supporting this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Kalis. Jeremy, can you unmute?
Oh, yep, thank you. So like everyone else, I'm very sympathetic to Mr. Chow. And I read all of his emails, and I also spoke with Margot, who lives at the same address. And I'm also, I have similar thoughts to Jeannie when it comes to the painted lane versus not having a painted lane. And I've wondered about that myself in other locations. I know, like on the Tom Ave Carriageway, we don't have a painted contraflow lane going the entire distance. We have it just at intersections. And I think in the Brookside Albemarle project, there's a similar thing for a short portion of it. So again, it's not really for tonight, but I do want to fully wrap my head around that at some point. For this particular proposal, I do think I essentially agree with Isaac. It helps to have things well defined and keep people where they should be with defined lanes, and I think ultimately that is probably safer. So I support that. I certainly support the allowing the two-way bike, and I pretty much support the striping plan as presented. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Isaac.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just jump in with two more things. So there was a question about roadway widths. So on this Columbia Ave section, assuming we pick a very sort of standard width of bike lane of 6 feet, you still have 17 feet remaining, which I would consider to be fairly wide, especially on a one-way. And then on Heatherland, it would actually be even more remaining width, assuming we continue a 6-foot wide contraflow bike lane. On Heatherland, it'd be 26 feet. I think if this was a very, very narrow street, I absolutely would acknowledge that we'd have some second thoughts as far as what would and wouldn't work. But here, I think the roadway width makes it, at least to me as a transportation engineer, a little bit of an easier decision. And then I did want to say we do have precedent for this. So we do have a contraflow bike lane on Hagan Road. That was something that came about sort of in the probably first year or so of the pandemic when we wanted to support bicycling, kind of similar to why we're here today as well. That was a one-way roadway. It was a very convenient path to Newton South. And honestly, since the 2-3 years that it's been in, we've never gotten any complaints. So just wanted to share, we do have some experience with that here as well in Newton. Thanks.
Can I just
Thank
say
you.
one more thing?
Yes, Jamie.
I'm not opposed to all of that. I know that they exist other places. You are, and of course you didn't get a complaint. You have a complaint right in front of you about this possibility. And this is a narrow road. I know I sit in Too Many Complete Streets Working Committee to know that this is one of those roads that shouldn't have had parking on one side anyway, because it's 23 feet. And what I'm concerned about, maybe you can draw lines better. I'm concerned about 2 cars coming down Columbia, the one-way section, and they have to move over because they can't possibly go into any kind of parking area, bike lane or anything. And in fact, all you have is, you know, a 10, and yes, and you have space because there is parking. So you barely have the 6, the 10, and the 7 for parking. You have just exactly the right thing. And I feel like it's 2 principles that I was assured of for a while there, that no parking parking would not be taken away and bike lanes would not be drawn. They'd be shallow because we have a small street, a residential street, a not so wide street. In fact, a narrow street that if you went around the whole city, and we're starting to do that, that you remove parking from one side, just like where I live. So, and I can't imagine a Sharrow going down my street. Honestly, Sharrow, I mean, a separate bike lane on one side and getting everybody over, you know, if it was a one-way street, it would have to be a one-way street. So I'm just saying that these are 2 principles that you don't have to do this time. You can put a sign saying bikes are allowed. You can legalize it at the end of Kenneth and Columbia to say, except for bicycles. And then bicycles know they can just go right ahead and you legalize that. That's all I'm asking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Mitch.
Good conversation. And I guess to Mr. Chow, I was hoping to have made the site visit the other day with Councilor Downs, and I think Councilor Kalis was there, and I was out of town. But, you know, I think at this point I'm pretty up to speed. And again, I was listening to the last comment by Jenny, and this whole thoroughfare is a pretty odd thoroughfare with, you know, portions of a one-way street and Heatherland, a one-way portion. And I think there is a learning curve. I think Councilor Kalis is right. There's a learning curve for bicyclists coming off of Needham Street, crossing from Avalon, similarly crossing Winchester. And I was thinking that, you know, if bicyclists are going to be using it in a big way, having cars parked on the south side, you know, even one car, you know, I think Councilor Downs said it was pretty empty when she's been there. And I go through there periodically and it doesn't look like this, but I think not having any cars parked there. And then I think the other thing, which is important for the learning curve of those cars that, you know, decide, oh, we're just going to try to make it to Winchester Street one way because I'm late for whatever. If you do have a painted lane, you do have some better signage. I think better signage is key. I think that actually protects that not unintended, but the two-way traffic. And I guess the only thing I would add is, and again, I don't know if this would help, but maybe some signage about, sensitivity in the area of somebody who, needs help, and it might not help the K through 5, but it might help other people. But I'm sort of coming around to supporting it. I do have a concern about the crosswalk on Winchester and how that ties in with the lane. Not totally figured out exactly how that lane crosses Needham Street, because the signal is on the other corner of Columbia and Needham. But I think it's a combination of things, and better signage, the painted lane, the no parking on the south side, I think is very important. And I think, if we could do a test or a trial, that might be better, but I'm not sure that's needed. But at this point, I can see the benefit outweighs the negatives.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate those points. And I do think that we could look into signage, if there's any additional signage on Columbia that might be helpful. I do want to remind everybody that we have 7 items after this item. So I want to be respectful for everyone that's waiting for their item. Alex, do you have something else you'd like to say quickly?
Yes, you said traffic council is not about painting or striping, but that is related to the signage. And a single one-way or do not enter sign is less effective in some senses than the striped counterflow bike lane, because the counterflow striped bike lane along the whole width tells people, no matter where they're looking, that there's going to be two-way traffic. And so in that sense, I think it's important to the safety of being able to bicycle in that direction.
Right, thank you. Just to be clear, so the painting is not something we're voting on, but it clearly is part of the concept plan and part of what the proposal is. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for this discussion. We're going to close the public comment period. We're going to move to the members of traffic council and the city councilors in the room for any additional discussion, or if anyone would like to make a motion.
I'd make a motion to advance the item.
Okay, so we have a motion. This is for TC 3023, made by Councilor Downs, to approve the language. This would be TPR 888, to approve the language, the changes that are shown on slides 29 and 30 for Columbia Avenue. I guess before we vote, I would say that we do have an appeals process. If anyone is extremely opposed, there is a process for appealing the traffic council vote. If that happens, then this entire item would be taken up by the Public Safety and Transportation Committee. I think that would be unfortunate in terms of the timeline for hopefully getting this moving before school starts. I'm not sure when this would make its way to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee and to City Council if the item is appealed, but it is always an option. Councilor Kalis.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, I thought that Mr. Fishman had a good idea. You mentioned some type of test. Is that something that you do? What does it mean? How long does it last? When do you evaluate it at the end? I want to make sure we're being as sensitive as we can to the concerns that we've heard.
Well, I think in this case, if we approve this item, there's a lot of changes that would be made, right? We would have, the concept plan would come to light, right? We would remove the parking, we would add the stop signs, the bicycle signs, the paint, we would have DPW go ahead and paint in the bike lanes. So, I mean, we could do a trial, but we could also just vote on it. And we can always vote something else later anyway. If we want to unpaint the whole thing and take all the signs out, that would just be an item at traffic council. I don't really see the advantage of doing a trial for something like this.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other comments? We have a motion by Counselor Downs. Okay. Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 888.
Okay, and can you call the roll, please?
We need a
I
motion
guess we need a
on,
motion
we need a
for
motion on TC 2923.
923. So I'll make a motion to approve the language of TPR 889 for TC 2923 as shown on slide 35. This is for Heatherland Road to move forward with the concept plan.
Okay, Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 889.
Thank you. So these were both approved by Traffic Council. We are now in our 20-day appeals period, which goes through August 2nd. If the item is not appealed, then we should be moving forward with these changes in August. If it is appealed, then it would be put on hold and wait for the Public Safety and Transportation Committee to take it up and the full City Council. So again, thank you for coming and expressing your opinions. And we're just going to move on to our next item now. So our next item is TC 2723. Sergeant Wade requesting discussion and possible change to the parking regulations on Warren Avenue in West Newton to restrict parking on both sides in order to ensure access for emergency vehicles. So again, we'll do the presentation and then public comment. This is Warren Avenue in West Newton. It's a one-way narrow street that connects Webster Street with River Street. Here's a view looking north from Webster Street. We could see that the road was recently repaved. A portion of the road, 15 feet of the roadway was recently repaved. It's actually a 25-foot right-of-way from approximately, from this brick wall to, beyond the curb, really. That's the public right-of-way. But what was recently repaved is a 15-foot portion of the roadway. We have no parking signs. We have 4 utility poles on the street. All 4 poles have a sign to say no parking. So parking officially is restricted on the west side. It's not restricted on the east side. We could see along the street, there's basically 2 little areas of a diagonal cutout. You can see that sometimes cars park on that cutout here and then further up. Here's another view. This is this other cutout where cars sometimes are parking on the east side. We see cars also, and this was recently taken, parking on the west side in the no parking zone, actually on top of the sidewalk. So this is not legal anywhere in the city to park on the sidewalk. So I don't know how long this has been happening, maybe for a long time, but it is possible that cars that are parked in this way would receive a parking ticket. Here's a view of the end of Warren Avenue. This is getting close to River Street. It's still a 15-foot roadway, but a 25-foot right-of-way. You can see it narrows, there's no extra pavement or sort of cutouts. So it's just 15 feet of roadway at this point. So again, the existing parking regulations are no parking on the west side and no restriction officially on the books on the east side. So I have 2 different recommendations that I'm going to go through, and then we'd like to have some discussion about which of them, if anything, we should move forward with. So the first recommendation is to restrict parking on both sides of the entire street. So because there's really nowhere to post signs on the east side, we could just use the existing utility poles on the west side and the existing signs and just add no parking both sides. And we have the language to be able to vote on that if that's what we want to do. Another option would be to try to retain parking. Really, it's sort of geared toward these two sort of diagonal cutouts that you see the cars parked in. What we could do is restrict parking. Well, with the 4 utility poles that we have, the first 2 could say just not change at all and have the no parking on the west side, so that we would sort of allow the parking in these cutout areas. But further up, we could on the last 2 poles add the both sides, no parking on both sides. So in other words, no parking on the west side for the beginning of the street, but allowing parking on the east side, and then sort of halfway down the street beyond the cutouts, no parking on either side. That's the second option that I came up with. And this is the language for that. And that is the presentation. I want to open it up now to public comment. If anyone would like to comment, if you could raise your hand, Jesse.
Hello, I am commenting to say that I do not support having parking not allowed on both sides, because this is a public street and I don't want parking to not be allowed on a public street.
But can you say that in a different way? Are you saying that you want to allow parking, or you don't?
I want to allow parking because this is a public street, and both because this is a one-way street and because this was recently paved. There is a big there's more of a risk for people to drive faster than they should.
Okay.
If there are cars parked on neither side, and in addition, since this is only 1 block long, there's not too much traffic on this street, and so I don't expect emergency vehicles on this street unless there's actually an emergency on the street. And if there's an emergency on the street, I expect the emergency vehicles to actually block the whole street.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jesse, for that comment. I see Martha. If you can just say your name and your address, please.
My name is Martha Berardino and I live at 9 Warren Avenue. And we've been here for 40 years. And in the beginning, there were no parking signs ever. And then just a few years ago, they appeared, and evidently there had been a change, but no signs went up. I guess in the 90s or something like that. I'm not sure. We've never had a problem. We even had an Easter celebration at our house with many people arriving from Connecticut and other places. And someone fainted, and a fire truck and an ambulance and all sorts of people came. And, we had lots of parking on the street, and the ambulance and the fire truck got through. So I'm not quite sure what the problem is. Nobody moved their cars, and the fire truck and the ambulance came. So I do not want to lose the 2 spots that we have now. I mean, it's already a burden for us. We've got 4 adults that live at our house, and so we have 3 cars, and it's really a burden on us to not have, especially the car there on the right, to not have that spot as an option. And I would ask you to go with your second option, where the 2 parking spots could be allowed.
Right.
Thank you.
So you're sort of supporting, I guess this is this 3rd utility pole and then the 4th one. So allowing parking at the first cutout, allowing parking here, and then when it gets really narrow, obviously I don't see how anyone would want to have parking right here. You'd just be blocking the road. You know, can't get
Yes.
through it all.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Thank you. Other comments?
David, so it sounds like we're talking about parking regulations that just sort of more formalize what's going on now, right? Like where there really isn't an issue, and where there may be an issue, but no one really parks anyway. Would that be a fair interpretation?
I think so, but I would also say that you know, again, you can't park on the sidewalk. That's not legal parking.
David, we did get one more letter. It was
Oh, yes, we
it
did
was
get
pretty
one letter.
lengthy.
Yeah, we did get the one letter from the resident of 3 Warren Avenue that was on the same page to allow the parking in the 2 diagonal spaces. He requested to allow parking over the curb, and I don't think we can do that. We can't allow, that's against the city ordinance on any street in the city. But I think that it's closer to our option 2. To this recommendation right here. To restrict parking on both sides further down the street. Any other comments from the public or from members of traffic council? Jennifer,
Hi there. So
we just need to know your name and your address, please.
Jennifer Fucci, and I'm at 9 Warren Ave as well. So the biggest problem is that there's no other available parking around where we live on other streets, with the exception of Webster Street, which I think is super dangerous that you can park on that because the traffic goes by really quickly, but we have nowhere to park. And in fact, a couple weeks ago, my dad moved the car to the CVS parking lot for an hour and it got towed, right? Because we were trying to accommodate somebody coming to our house and having enough room. So there's literally nowhere for visitors or people to park. And the 2 spots is it's not enough as it is. And there's nothing around. So what are we supposed to do?
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comments from the public? Mitch.
So, so in this picture, David, the car on the right, is that legal?
Well,
Yes, yeah,
that's a complicated question. I don't know if it's legal according to zoning regulations or if you're parking in the front setback.
But
It's not, it would not be ticketed by the Newton parking control officers. I guess if the real answer would be asking inspectional services.
so I know this was docketed by Sergeant Wade, but if you had cars in this area that you've just sort of allowed parking where people aren't on, I guess you could call it the sidewalk, but off of the property line, would there be sufficient space in that 15 feet for emergency vehicles?
So can you say your question again? Let me go to the slide. Are you asking?
Yeah. So in that area,
well, we can't allow parking on the sidewalk.
but that's on the left side. But on the right side,
Yeah.
assuming you had a line of cars on the right side, there would be sufficient space to go around those cars for emergency vehicles. That's my question.
I guess it depends on how the cars are parked. In this image, this car is parked way over as far as they possibly could. There's no snow, and probably there's enough room.
I mean, I was just listening to Ms. Berardino's comment, and I was trying to imagine cars parked and how emergency vehicles get through. And I guess to me, that would be the question. Everything else is sort of secondary.
Well, that's why the item was docketed. It was
Yeah.
docketed by the police to restrict parking on both sides because of concerns about emergency vehicles. That was our first recommendation. We also are recognizing it's a narrow street. There's not, I mean, there are driveways, but there's sometimes people that have more cars than they have space off the street. So we tried to come up with a, something that allows some parking to be maintained, but also makes it as safe as, I mean, safety is the most important thing. I think safety is more important than convenience.
Thank you.
Thank you. Captain Doucette.
So David, in this photo right now, as the way it's written, a car could actually park up by that tree past your vehicle legally, in essence, completely blocking the street for a fire engine to get through. I understand back where your car is, it's a wider because someone purposely set their curbs back to give the road a little more space and the previous parking spot. So I think the issue is on either end. If people park in the middle here, there possibly is enough room, but if someone parks all four tires on the new asphalt, there's not enough room for a fire engine or a truck or an ambulance to get through. So without hopping the curb to squeeze by, and as you can see, there's several poles and trees on that side. So I think that's our issue here. So I would err on the side of going with your second option to limit on either end and allowing these two middle spots to see if, because it looks like in the photos that there's mostly driveways between those two cars in that photo. So people can't park there anyways. They're going to be blocking the driveway. But we need to probably restrict on either end.
I mean, we're dealing with what we have. I mean, again, this is a 25-foot right of way, meaning that this sidewalk, the staircase is in the public right of way. We think it has, I mean, no one's gonna, I mean, I'm just saying that further down the street, a 25-foot right of way probably goes to this fence and beyond. A 25-foot right of way over here is like way over here, right? So this is what we're dealing with on the street. We're just trying to make it as safe for these residents as we can and trying to maintain some level of parking if possible. So I think that we're all coalescing around option 2, it seems like. Martha, I see your hand up again.
So I was wondering what clearance does does a fire truck need?
It's about 8.5 feet wide.
So, so it can,
Like,
so
in
it
this
can
case,
get,
we don't know if I mean, I'm not sure if I guess if this car was parked a little further up, probably the fire truck couldn't get through.
and also we had no fire hydrant on this street. So unless the unless the engine's coming, the fire engine's coming for an emergency, it's not going to fight the fire from there because there's no water source, right? I don't even know where the closest fire hydrant is. It must be on River Street somewhere.
And also trash and recycling vehicles need to get through. Okay.
Yeah, once a
So,
week.
right.
And nobody parks on the street on trash day. Not even in those two spots, but
Okay, so what we have now is recommendation 1 and then recommendation 2, or the alternative recommendation. Any last comments from the public, or what comments do we have from the members of Traffic Council and the City Council?
I think if we were going to do something, we would take the less restrictive approach first.
The alternative 2,
Right.
so this language. I think that's right. I think that that's probably the best approach at this point. I think it sort of makes official what's already happening on the street, assuming that people are not parked on the west side.
Mm-hmm.
So would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd make a motion on this option 2.
Okay. So we have a motion made by Mitch. This would be TPR 890 to approve the language as shown on slide 45, which would restrict parking on the west side, the entire length, and on the east side, except for the first 270 feet north of Webster Street. Any last comments? We have the 20-day appeals period. So we would need to wait until after August 2nd. If there's no appeal that comes in, then those changes could be made on those 2 signs on the first, on the second 2 utility poles. Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0. TPR 890, option 2.
Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to our next item, which is TC 3523. David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, on behalf of neighborhood residents, requesting to review and possibly change the parking restrictions on Farwell Street to ensure safe access for buses and emergency vehicles. So this is Farwell Street. It hits North Street twice down here. Farwell Street comes up this way and then takes the 90-degree turn and ends up here hitting Farwell Street again, just very close to the Waltham line. I took several pictures of Farwell Street. Here is a picture looking, this is the beginning of Farwell Street looking down to North Street. This is looking south. It's pretty narrow street right there. It's 20 feet wide right now. You could park on both sides of the street. Oops. Yep. So a little bit further to the north, this is also looking in the same direction, southbound toward North Street. You could see that parking is allowed on both sides down here. There's an area that parking in the middle of Farwell Street where parking is not allowed on one side from this point up northerly. And I'll show you that on another slide. Gets a little bit wider, it's 22 feet at this point. So here is turning around, looking the other direction. This is looking north now, over toward like where that bend is. And you can see parking's on both sides. Now here's after you take the curve and then look back. This is, looking toward the east, and then Farwell Street continues down that way toward North Street. 22 feet wide. So the background is that, these are the existing regulations. This is the only area on Farwell Street where currently you're not allowed to park, just like right in the middle on the west side. We received a request. It was anonymous from a resident who lives on the street requesting parking restrictions on the street. He or she also sent a video that showed a school bus sort of stuck on the street. I think it was down in this beginning part of the street, unable to get through. So again, currently parking is only restricted in the middle, not down on the southern side and not up around the bend. So our recommendation is to increase the no parking zone from where it currently is up toward the north and around the bend, and also further south toward North Street. So that is our recommendation to begin the no parking zone right at this point. to put a sign on this utility pole. There would be no parking at the fire hydrant, at the driveway, around the bend, and continuing down all the way down to North Street. So adding a no parking zone in the area in the blue, it's already here in the red, and adding in the orange area. So that's our recommendation for making the street safer, to be able to allow buses through, emergency vehicles, trash, recycling. And this is the language that we would need to vote on to make that happen. So I'm going to open it up now for public comment. Anyone from the public? Let's see. So how do you say the name? Is it Elijah?
Ophelia?
Yes. Can you please say your full name and your address?
Yes, I'm Ilya Ivanov from 131 Farwell Street. So the problem in that first section is that that's the section that a school bus uses to turn around
Which
and
is
go
the first
completely
section?
around.
When you say the first
The one
section,
between North Street and the road,
So-
what's the name?
like
Joseph Road?
the area shown in orange or the area shown in blue?
Orange. So the
Down
first
here.
picture where the road is the shortest.
Uh-huh.
So the problem there is that even if there's a van on the opposite side, the school bus still can't really make this turn, because if it's very close to the corner, they have to kind of go in front and then attempt to go around, which causes problems. The other problem is that it's one of the favorite spots for people doing the like the gardeners, the
Landscape.
lawn, the landscape. That's it. So like North Street doesn't really have parking for landscape. So a lot of landscapers tend to kind of park in that section of the street. And then if a bus is attempting to pass, even if, you know, they're on the parts of the street that's on the southern side of Farwell Street, it's hard for them to pass through there. Like today, I've actually seen moving trucks parked on that side of the street, and the bus has to honk. I can send photos and video. I was actually there today. The bus had to honk, and they had to wait for the moving truck people to come to the moving truck, move it out of the way. This section of the street is just because it's so close to Walton. There's so many like different trucks and other large vehicles that tend to park on that side. That's already only 20 feet. So it's a big problem for the buses. And I can, again, send additional photos of that happening today. But it's also a big problem for our driveway. Like you can see, that's our car there. And if anyone parks in front, we kind of have to drive over the sidewalk in order to exit our driveway, because there's just, like, if somebody's parked in front, there's no other way to really leave the driveway besides driving over the sidewalk. So I just kind of wanted to mention that for that section of the street, I think potentially bigger problem is the opposite side, because there's already driveways and people shouldn't be parking that close to the driveways in the first place. But just because it's so tight, it's kind of, and just because of the class of vehicles that park there, such as trucks and landscaping vehicles, it becomes very difficult to exit in the mornings in the first place, but also for the buses to pass through.
Okay, thank you for that comment. So
Thank
just
you.
to be clear, on this side of the street is 20 feet wide, and parking is currently allowed on both sides. And we're recommending, at least at this point, to restrict parking on one side and allow parking on the other side. That's the recommendation right now. And, you know, it's a parking regulation. We could try different things. We could try to, you know, move forward with the proposal, see how that goes. If it's not solving the problem completely, come back again with a more specific recommendation. But so that's where we are right now. Other comments?
Okay, yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. I just want to say, I just want to mention that that side of the street was the original problem, and that's kind of what prevents buses from turning around in the first place. Like cars parked at the corner of Farwell and Rose Street, basically, like supposed to draw the street, because if a bus has to go left to go around that car, there's no way for them to actually bend around that car and actually exit the street. So we can follow up later if the problem persists. I'm just
So
saying,
can I just
based
ask
on
when you say
the,
it, can I just ask to clarify, when you're talking about a bus turning around, do you just mean a bus
we
driving
make a
through,
right on Jaws.
like coming up, driving through?
No, from what I remember seeing, they would turn right on the Jaws Street, but I might be wrong on that. They might be driving through.
So the bus trying to get through can't get through sometimes because there's cars parked.
Right. So the situations where I've seen buses have to wait is when cars are parked on the right side of the street when you enter from North Street. So most of the situations where bus has to wait is when they have a car or a truck in front of them, rather than on their left.
So you're saying
So
that
when
if there's a car
they're
parked over here,
close to the street.
the bus
Correct.
can't go around?
Yes.
Thank you. Other comments?
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public on this? Or comments from members of traffic council or city councilors on the call? Okay, so we did not receive any emails on this item so far, in advance of the meeting, I should say. Again, this is the recommendation we have prepared for tonight to restrict parking on one side of the street, sort of extending where it is now to the north and to the south, continuing to allow parking on one side of the street, see if that solves the issue. It should help. If it doesn't solve the full issue, we could revisit this. Any comments from anyone?
I think that's fair.
I think it's a good
Mitch?
plan.
I guess I wonder whether, since we don't have any comments, whether you might want to do a trial to just see if that's really the issue, or there's some other stuff that you need to add on, like the bus turnaround or whatever that means. But I'm always suspicious if you don't have people commenting that, maybe there are, I don't know, I'm just not convinced that that's the solution yet, but it's worth a try.
Yeah,
trial.
well, everybody on the street was notified.
Yeah.
Hello?
Is someone else trying to speak?
Yes, but I don't know how to raise my hand.
Okay, I don't see who you are. Could you say your name, please?
My name is Sharon, and I live on the corner of Farwell and Joseph Road.
Okay, and we just need to know your last name and your address.
My name is Sharon Hughes. I'm at 50 Joseph Road,
Thank you.
and that's on the corner of Farwell and Joseph. And it says the school buses come down Farwell Street. They make a right-hand turn onto Joseph Road.
Mhm.
So that's what their loop is. They don't go all the way down Farwell Street.
So you're saying that they take just that first little block and then turn right?
The ones that I see, and I'm home a lot, I'm retired.
Mhm.
And they come down. The pickup is on North Street. They make a right onto Farwell Street. They make a right onto Joseph Road. I don't know where they go from there.
Okay.
So it's not most of Farwell Street that is in the way of school buses. My concern with restricting parking is, one of my issues with Farwell Streets is people drive way too fast. And there are way too many very, very large trucks, like trucks that I expect to see on highways, not on residential streets. And I'm afraid if that street is just more open, cars are gonna go just that much faster.
Thank you. Jeremy,
Yep, thanks. So I think this is fine to go ahead. I just wanted to briefly touch on Mitch's point about hearing from people and notifying people. I mentioned this before, but when you have the large apartment building, not everyone gets a notice. And that may explain the lack of comment here, although we did get some people showing up tonight. But of course, that being said, I think people will notice once the change goes in, and you might hear from them at that point. So that's it. And hopefully we can work it on some point at properly notifying people who do not own their homes. Thank you.
So David, just to clarify, if we wanted to revisit this, we could do it with a new docket fairly quickly, assuming that docket is requesting something a little bit different than what this was.
Yep.
Gotcha.
That is true. Danielle, did we notify we notified the apartment buildings that are actually abutting the street. We didn't notify like every single apartment building in this whole complex.
There
But
was,
the ones, right?
yeah, there was 35 letters went out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Just to the,
So again, it's just a parking restriction. We could change it later if it's not working. It seems like this makes sense to me on the street like this, to just like, this is the minimum to make sure that vehicles could get, to try to help vehicles to be able to get through. If it doesn't solve the whole issue, we can revisit it. We could restrict parking even more, maybe on both sides of this one first block. If the buses are still having a difficulty getting through, if it's still going to continue to be a bus route. It gets really complicated up here with all the different businesses. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to even tell where the street is sometimes along this section. So I really think this is a good step forward. It might not be the whole solution, but I think it makes it better than what we have now. So any last comments, or would anyone like to make a motion?
I will move to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilor Downs to approve the language of TPR 891 to extend the parking restriction to the north and then to the south, as shown on slide 54. Any last comments? Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 891.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so our next item, we still have 5 more items. We're chugging through. We have TC 2823. This is Isaac Prezant, City Transportation Engineer, requesting to add a stop sign to the Prince Street northbound approach to Temple Street. Hopefully we could do this one quickly. This is, again, just like previous, one of the items we heard previously, a T intersection. This is at Prince Street, at Temple Street, near the Pierce School. Here's a view looking, this is Prince Street looking north toward Temple Street. This is where we have kids walking down to the Pierce School. This is the same slide that we saw last time about a T intersection coming to Traffic Council. We tend to approve this type of request. Right of way, it helps ensure that the cars come to a stop before they turn onto Temple Street. A small safety benefit, we always think, especially near a pedestrian route, a bike route. And so again, we are proposing to approve this recommendation to add the stop sign at this location. And we have the language to be able to vote on that tonight. We do have 4 emails that we received within the past week in support of this stop sign. So that's my recommendation. Is there anyone who wishes to comment on this item? Okay, good. Then in that case, I will make a motion to approve the language. This would be TPR 892 to add the stop sign Prince Street northbound at Temple Street. And are there any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll on this one, please? Hey, Danielle, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. yeah.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 892.
Right. So now we're at TC 2523. I see we're joined by Councilor Lucas from Ward 2. So we're going to do the presentation and then we'll go to public comment. Here is the location. This is 950. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read it into the record. This is TC 2523, Councilors Lucas and Norton requesting to restrict parking in front of 957 Washington Street for approximately 20 feet to improve sight lines for vehicles exiting the driveway. This is where 957 Washington Street is. It's sort of in the middle of the block on Washington Street. Here's a view of it. This is, I believe it's a multifamily residence with a pretty significant parking in the back. Here's the driveway. Again, it's in the middle of the block. Parking is not allowed here, obviously, and parking is restricted 5 feet from the driveway, as it is at every driveway in the city. Here's a photo that we received, probably taken by a resident, that shows a car parked way too close to the driveway. This is clearly within 5 feet of the driveway. It's not parked appropriately. It could be ticketed. We do get tickets that are issued all the time, every day, for cars parked within 5 feet of a driveway. This car should be ticketed. An option that we could decide to vote on is to restrict parking within 20 feet of this driveway. I think part of the discussion we might want to have is related to why this one particular driveway on Washington Street, where we have many driveways all up and down Washington Street, you know, residences, even Walgreens or Honda Village or other businesses that don't have parking restricted within 20 feet, that it's still only 5 feet at many, many driveways across the city. So I think that's something that I just think we should think about and maybe talk about. Why are we restricting parking at this one particular driveway? Is it opening sort of a Pandora's box or precedent? So again, our options, one option is to NAN the item, another option is to approve it. If we do vote to approve this item, we do have the language in front of us to be able to vote on that tonight. It would just be pushing back the no parking zone 20 feet from the driveway as shown on this slide. So that is the presentation we have. I'm going to open it up now for public comment. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? If you could just raise your hand. Margaret Ward, if you can just say your name and your address, please.
Hi there. I'm Margaret Ward and I live at 957 Washington Street. I think you raise a valid point on why, why are we considering just my residence, and, while we're not looking at the entire street, no one else seems to have, everyone else has the same conditions pulling out. And as I understand, there's been a lot of accidents that have happened on left-hand turns on Washington Street. And I would go further to say is I think actually the entire street, parking should be restricted on the entire street on the residential side, and permit parking only on the Mass Pike side. And that would eliminate a lot of your left-hand turn accidents that are occurring. I think I saw somewhere 250 in a period of time. So, and I can speak to that because it is very difficult. Sometimes when you're pulling out, most people seem to drive large SUVs and trucks nowadays, and it is hard pulling out, especially the way the street is the way the street runs, it's on a bend, and at times you're pulling out or you're trying to pull out, you can't see at all. Your view is completely obstructed. And I'm a prudent driver. If I can't see, then I just end up taking a right-hand turn really quickly. Now, and I do that often, right? Because I don't have a choice. And the other point is our house, where we are located, we're just after the traffic light at the intersection of Lowell Ave. So a lot of people are speeding through there, which makes it a little bit even, dodgier in trying to pull out. The other, so view obstruction is one issue. The other issue is trash collection. As you saw in another photo, someone was parked, people park very close to the entrance of our driveway. We're trying to, we're multi-resident house. So we have, a bunch of trash bins that we are taking out, and it becomes a problem. We get, obstruction. And then also with the leaf, and then on days that we bring in out lawn bags, it gets difficult trying to put out our trash bins in addition to lawn bags. And often the lawn bags have to go on the sidewalk, and the view is blocked by the cars parked there. And so we don't ever get lawn bags picked up. We have to call and ask for them to get picked up, etc. The final comment that I want to make, and this is really important, and it should be noted, that right now, you don't see much parking along Washington Street, not like you did before the pandemic. And the reason for this is because the MBTA, right now, they are in 2021, the MBTA canceled direct to downtown bus service from West Newton all the way down Washington Street. So you have to get a bus downtown directly, you have to go to Newton Corner. So I have taken the bus, and I can speak on this with experience, 30 years experience. I have taken the MBTA, the bus, as well as the commuter rail downtown from Newtonville. And I've met a lot of passengers along the way over the years, become friends with them. And a lot of them live in other parts of Newton, and they would come and they would park on Washington Street, particularly people who lived in the financial district, because people may not be aware, but these bus routes end right on Federal Street in the financial district. So a lot of people who work in the financial district find it ideal to catch the buses because they end up, the bus route ends up right there. So I know people even who live in Waltham would drive, park along Washington Street and catch a bus. Now, all those people are no longer parking on Washington Street because they discontinued the direct downtown bus service from this area. However, the MBTA is looking to resume direct downtown bus service from West Newton again. They're talking about resuming. I mean, they would have to. It's ridiculous. You can't get a bus from here downtown. So when that does happen, you're going to see a lot of people parked on Washington Street again. So that is the important point that I want to make on this as you consider all this stuff. But thank you for the time.
Thank you very much for all those comments. And I could talk to you probably for hours and hours about the MBTA and the changes that they made and the changes that they're proposing that have actually been approved, which will not include express bus service anymore from West Newton or other parts of Newton. Very, very frustrating.
Well, the last I saw that they were, resuming it.
Nope. Nope, that is not.
That must have been very.
But we are, like, our number one transportation priority, this is getting off topic, but our number one transportation priority is improved commuter rail stations in Newtonville, Auburndale, West Newton, with two-sided tracks and ADA access. So I could definitely envision in the future more, a lot of changes along Washington Street and more people taking the commuter rail into Boston. But so that's a whole different topic. So, but thank you very much for those comments. And Councilor Lucas.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the presentation, and thank you to Ms. Ward for her comments. I sent you an email earlier today. Did you receive it?
Yeah, was it a photo? Was it basically a photo?
It was
Almost
a
like that, pretty much.
No,
But from a
no.
different vantage point.
Exactly. I'm gonna. You can't really see it. I apologize.
It's a
But
photo
basically,
of the driveway, of like trying
Yeah.
to exit the driveway, right?
Of someone trying to exit the driveway, and they're looking left, back east towards Newton Corner, and there's a giant, appears to be a pickup truck, that's parked within that, call it 20 feet zone. You can't see the cars who are traveling west on Washington Street. And it is, if I lived there, it would be extremely dangerous knowing if that light was green and you want to exit your driveway and you want to make a left-hand turn to go east onto Washington Street, you cannot see the cars at all. I want to be very clear on that. You cannot see the cars at all. It is dangerous. And I think, Mr. Kostis, you stated earlier, would this set a precedent? If it sets the precedent to make cars exiting their respective driveways and streets easier, then I say that's a good precedent to start. You know, it's a public safety issue and it is dangerous. You know, I think you can do it for 20 feet. Oh, what you do? Okay, you can do it for 20 feet and there still will be ample parking in front of this particular lot here. You could probably still fit 2 or 3 cars there. You could easily install the sign in that little berm there where you have the tree with saying no parking from here to the corner. You have that as well going further east on Washington Street outside the other condo complex on the corner of Lowell and Washington. There is a sign there that says no parking from here to the corner or so. Basically, to what Ms. Ward said and what I said, I think I docketed it, so I'm in full support of installing the sign there. And if anyone has any questions to me, I'd be happy to answer. And thank you for the time.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Margaret, did you have another comment?
Yeah, I did. And another point I wanted to make is another problem or another contributing factor to view obstruction is that further down, actually, if you look on the street, the next tree behind the white car, there is a substantial amount of weeds that are thick and tall. And right now they also contribute to blocking your view. So, you know, you try to get like the best angle and you're moving around and trying to get a view. And right now I'm like, oh my God, these weeds are probably around 4 feet in height. They're all around that tree there, the second tree behind that white car if you're heading east. Yeah, I mean, so, it'd be great if the city could, cut down those weeds so it's not also contributing to the problem. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a note. Do you know the address?
David, I think there's a 311 call.
Yeah.
Since Ms. Ward lives there, she could just walk down, get an approximate address and call
Yeah.
either 311 or 796-1000 and put it in. It'll be done in a matter of days. It'll go right to the right person.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. That's probably easier than if I were to do it, because if you put it into 311, then you will be apprised of as the request moves forward, Ms. Ward.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that.
Okay. Ron.
Hi, Farhan Bajaj. I live at 52 Greenlawn, so I'm not in here, or I'm not near this neighborhood, but as some of you may know, I'm interning with Josh Ostroff, Director of Transportation Planning this summer. And so I have read a lot of the comments on the survey regarding changes to Washington Street. And I just wanted to point out that in many of those responses, people who are using Washington Street noted that this visibility turning onto and off of Washington Street was one of their major safety concerns. So I just wanted to point out that this is sort of a widespread issue to provide more context to the council.
Thank you very much for that. Any other comments? Mitch.
Yeah, if you've got a minute after Mitch, I
Yeah,
have a
so,
question on try to put this in context.
okay. So let's start with Mitch and then we'll go to Councilor Downs.
I just had a quick question. So I think the owner or Ms. Ward indicated that it's a multifamily. So how many cars are actually behind that use that driveway?
Ms. Ward, can you tell us how many
Yeah,
cars?
there's 5 cars.
And do they back out or drive straight out?
We drive straight out.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Downs?
So one of the things that Farhad is working on is the preparation for the Washington Street pilot, which looks at different ways to configure the street to improve safety and make it a more appealing street to walk along in general. So I think that will take care of some of this. I am, however, fully in support of doing this as a temporary measure to give residents exiting this driveway and probably the next one at the Oakley Spa, which may be or may not be closed at the moment, but which will eventually get redeveloped. We need to have some safety along this road, and there are plenty of other places to park. And there will be even more when you can cross the street safely.
Thank you, Councilor Downs. Other comments? Any comments from members of Traffic Council? Okay, would anyone like to make a recommendation or a motion? We have some options to NAN it, to approve it. If we want to approve it, we do have the language that we could vote on. If anyone would like to make
I
that
would
motion.
move approval.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the language of TPR 893 that would restrict parking within 20 feet of the driveway. This is the language shown on slide 66 of this presentation. And any last comments before we vote? Okay, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 893.
Thank you very much. Again, we have a 20-day appeals period, so we have to wait until, I don't think it's going to be appealed, but we have to wait until after August 2nd before that sign could be relocated. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so our next item is TC 7318. This is Councilors Noel, Danberg, and Schwartz requesting to change the distribution of time limits in the Pleasant Street and Pelham Street public parking lots in Newton Center to install reserved spaces for EV charging stations and or EV shared vehicles. This item we heard years ago, back in 2018, we held it for a trial to be able to install the chargers in this lot. And now we're back with the chargers in place. We just need to make some changes to some technical changes to our traffic and parking regulations. So here's where we are talking about. This is the Pleasant Street lot in Newton Center. Whoops. Here's a view that shows the charging parking spaces in the lot. And all we really need to do, this is a chart that's in our traffic and parking regulations in section 194. All we really need to do for Pleasant Street, you see, is just update these numbers. So the EV spaces in that, the number of EV spaces in that lot, oops, it's not 0, it's 4, right? So that's the edit that we need to make. So that is our recommendation to approve this item by updating the chart to this chart. All right, and I'm just gonna go ahead and make the motion to approve the language of TPR 894 to reflect the changes shown on page 71 and 72 of the presentation. Are there any comments? All right, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 894.
Okay, good. Thank you. Our next one is TC 3623, David Kozis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to remove several of the left lane must turn left and right lane must turn right regulations in West Newton Square from the TPR. Okay. So I'm glad that you're here, Isaac. I'm going to try and run through this. I'm glad you're here. If anyone has any more questions, I think I can probably do this fairly well. So this is just the technical changes that we need to make to our traffic and parking regulations after the presentation that went to the Public Safety and Transportation Committee of changes that we are making to the traffic flow in West Newton. So just going through these one by one. So this is Washington Street right here, Washington Street and Watertown Street and Chestnut Street. So right now, traveling westbound on Washington Street as you're approaching Chestnut Street, what we have now with the reconfigured West Newton Square is one through lane, and the left lane is a left lane must turn left from Washington Street onto Chestnut Street. And after a lot of feedback from the public and a lot of evaluation from city staff and consultants, the determination was made and presented to city council to change the left lane must turn left into a left lane or through a left turn or through lane, a through and left lane. So basically we would be having two lanes continuing westbound through West Newton, starting from here, 2 lanes. The left lane would be able to turn left or continue through. And then when you continue down Washington Street westbound, you get to Highland Avenue right here. What we have in the field right now is we have one through lane. The right lane is the through lane, and the left lane must turn left from Washington Street onto Highland. The recommendation is to turn that left lane into a left or through lane. So both lanes would be able to continue through. Then when you go even further down Washington Street westbound, you get to Cherry Street. And what we have now in the field is that the left lane continues through, the right lane is a right turn only onto Cherry Street. So the recommendation, what we would be changing is that right lane would be a right lane or a through lane. So again, both lanes you could continue through on Washington Street. And then also in the opposite direction, going eastbound on Washington Street at Cherry Street, what we have in the field right now is the right lane is a through lane, the left lane is a left lane must turn left from Washington Street onto Cherry Street. And again, here we would change this left lane to a left and through. So those are the changes that we are making in West Newton. And for Traffic Council, all we need to do is make these edits to our traffic and parking regulations. So these are the 4 changes that I just went through. We also noticed that there was one mistake that we're just removing while we're at it. There is no, really this Washington Street westbound onto Cherry Street is a mistake that'll be removed. So that is the recommendation. Isaac, did I do this right? Is there anything that needs to be changed?
No, I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So Jeremy.
Yep. Isaac, could you just clarify the timeline for this? I imagine that there's new signal equipment that's needed. So.
Right. Yeah. The biggest lead time would be the signal head orders. Assuming we can move ahead, I would say it's possible to be done in August. But I won't commit to that yet.
Okay.
But yeah, our intention is to move ahead as quickly as possible.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so
I would
yes.
just comment, we saw the presentation on this in PSNT when we were dealing with, when we dealt with the docket item from the Ward 3 counselors and myself to talk about traffic operations. And I support this. I think this will help, and we can certainly change it if it does not work.
Right. And we wouldn't even have to come to traffic council for anything, except there happens to be these two sections in our traffic and parking regulations, TPR 97 and TPR 98, that we need to update. Okay, so I will make a motion to approve the language of TPR 895 to reflect the changes as shown on slide 75. This is for TC 3623. Any last comments? Okay, Danielle, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0, TPR 895.
Okay, good. And we are at our last item of the evening. This is TC 3723. David Kosis, Traffic Council Chair, requesting to review and possibly add parking restrictions along the block of Wells Avenue between the Hampton Street and the Wells Avenue split. Okay, so this is the section of Wells Avenue that we will be talking about, this first block. Within that rectangle, officially in our traffic and parking regulations, parking is allowed on both sides, pretty much this whole area. But when you're out there and you see what it looks like, this is a view looking, I have a couple pictures. So this is looking from the split right to the north. This is if you're right here at the split and you're looking up toward Manhattan Street, that's this photo right there. And then a little further up when you're getting closer to Manhattan Road. Is it Manhattan Road or Manhattan Street? Actually, it's Manhattan Street. So this is a mistake on this title. But when you're closer to Manhattan Street, this is what it looks like. You have a left turn lane, a right turn lane. You have just the one lane coming in the opposite direction. If you're parked here, you're basically parked in the travel lane. I don't think people generally park there very often or ever, but it is allowed right now. This is looking to the south from Manhattan Street. Again, if you're parking along here, you're basically parking in the travel lane. And then this is a little further to the south. And then this is just before you get to this split at Wells Avenue. This is the driveway from the William James College. And this is really how this item came to us. It was from the William James College. They were concerned about cars that were parking right here. And actually even right here, even if a car is parked right here, cars exiting and taking the left, it's just very hard to be able to see in this case. I guess similar to the item that we just heard on Washington Street. So at this point, right there, this is 50 feet south of the driveway. It's 1,080 feet south of Manhattan Street. So all we're really doing here is extending the no parking restriction a little bit further, right there. Basically, this car would not be here. So the recommendation is to add along this whole stretch pretty much no parking. Even though there's not a lot of cars that are parking there, we still think it should be official in our books, so that there's also like very large parking lots for these buildings right here. There should be no reason for people to be parking on Wells Avenue. The recommendation is to allow a little bit of parking. So where it is right now, right? Like right along here where the road widens out, and once you get, beyond the double yellow line and a little further from the driveway. So that is our recommendation, to allow parking only in this little section that's not shown in red for this segment. So that is our recommendation. This is the language that would allow us to do this, to make this change. And so that is the presentation. Are there any comments from anyone? I don't see anyone. Okay, so in that case, oh, Mitch, you do have your hand up.
So David, can you go back to where that truck was parked? So that parking goes all the way up to the split
Yeah,
and beyond, or?
yes, yeah, beyond.
Yeah.
And we're not even talking about the rest of Wells Avenue. We're just talking about this first block right now.
I mean, I understand the rest of it. I guess I'm wondering whether the restriction, particularly where there's a split there, whether it would benefit by having, a couple less cars there. But you've looked at it, right?
Well, that was never even requested by the college. It does seem like the road widens out there. There
Okay.
is parking that happens there. The whole goal is to open up the sight lines and not to have people parking in the travel lane. And this would not be parking in the travel lane at that point.
But cars come out of this William and James curb cut, and
Yes,
and you're saying, for example, that truck doesn't impact on the sight line of making a left turn, right?
I think I'm saying that it does cause an impact, and so we want to remove it. Move back. The
Oh,
sign says
we
no
want to move
parking.
it back one.
We
car
would move, you see this sign right
Yeah,
there?
yeah,
We
I
would move
see.
it back
Yeah.
to there.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yep. Any other comments? Okay, so then I will make the recommendation to approve these changes as shown on slide 84 of the presentation. This would be TPR 896 for TC 3723. Any last comments? All right, Danielle, can you call the roll, please?
I think, David, we're gonna see more and more of this as cars keep getting bigger. We gotta start shrinking cars down to reasonable sizes.
Yeah, seems to be quite possible. Danielle, can you call the roll, please, for this one?
Sure. Mr. Kosis,
Aye.
Mr. Prezant,
Aye.
Captain Doucette,
Aye.
Counselor Downs,
Aye.
and Mr. Fishman.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved 5-0 TPR 896.
All right, so that was our last item. We don't have an August meeting. So everyone enjoy the rest of your summer, and our next meeting will be in September. So thank you all very much and have a good rest of the night.
Have a good summer, David.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.